just last week, I was at a panel discussion at a conference, and it was me and Untapped Growth. And they were trying to basically ask us question like, hey, when do you run and when do you stay and bunker in and make sure that you have a strong local community? So Untapped Growth, who is building homesteads, raising his own cows and all that stuff, versus me with a flag theory. So I had to explain that by no means I'm pro living your country, no matter like at any point that shit hits the fan. Definitely not. Again, in the flag theory, we always try to optimize for different things by stacking different flags, right? So you always try to look into incentives behind this country staying the same way and keeping promises in place. So, for example, we're looking for tax havens. I do believe those Caribbean tax havens will stay the same way just because follow the money, follow the incentives. That's their revenue stream, right? They have to stay tax haven in order to attract more people to buy passports, because otherwise they're fucked and they can't afford that. So I believe those will stay the same way. Then we're looking into different, banking system. Who are the most reliable banking? Again, follow the money, follow the incentives. But then when it comes to lifestyle and your own personal freedoms, in this scenarios, you don't really need an additional flag. You just need to make sure that you utilize other sovereignty tools, such as, you have a freezer full of meat, you know how to hunt, you know how to fish. You have your own garden, perhaps. You unschool your kids. You're in a good health that you don't need to go ask doctors to give you something. And in this scenario, you might achieve more freedom just by preparing in the spot with your local community. And having your tribe is, I would say, another flag. Like, go into places where people and those people have the same state of mind as you do. They're into sovereignty. They're into the same ideas, is also pretty valuable. So that's why we all, talking about the citadel kind of structures, but maybe not in the way that, we all talking about different kinds of citadel. And one of them is, for me, is just having a tribe of the same ideas.
Yeah, I think so. I think, that's definitely the case. And Untapped Growth takes the kind of opposite approach to this, which is, hunker down and go back to basics. And I think, again, Bitcoin allows you this kind of freedom to also to just stay where you are and be immune from the local bullshit that is around you and from your local government bullshit. Because really, once you take the Bitcoin pill, once you take the orange pill, it's only a matter of time before you discover the beef pill as well. And you realize that the only thing that you need to survive is beef. The only thing that humans need is clean water and beef. I don't need anything else. Clothes are nice, but you can do without them. You just need something that keeps you warm in the winter. And you definitely don't need to be shopping for clothes all the time. And I think historically, money pre-Bitcoin money was a massive headache for people because it's hard to get it, and when you get it, it loses its value, and you need to constantly be involved in a market economy and constantly serving others in a million different ways and involved in a variety of different economic activities, and you have to be close to a city. But the internet and Bitcoin really make this much easier. So now you don't really need to be constantly involved in a market economy. And if you snap out of your government's propaganda on food that tells you that, you need to be grazing all day and taking, a new meal every 2 hours and 6 to 11 rations of grain every day, like a cow. If you snap out of that, you realize, you could just do with one big meal of beef or red meat once a day, then you can be pretty immune to all of the bullshit. You and your family just need a farm or access to a farm, and you can school your kids, and you can work online, and you can save your money in Bitcoin, and that's the best way to save. So that offers you a pretty big margin of protection from this kind of bullshit, I think. So I can definitely see the strategy of untapped growth. And we've had untapped growth on this podcast before. We've discussed this with him. I think, the idea of buckling down, finding a few families, finding a few farmers, working on regenerating the soil, because the soil has been destroyed by fiat farming for decades, is also a viable strategy, because this kind of new totalitarianism, it's not exactly like the Soviet totalitarianism where they're knocking on everyone's door and taking everything that you own. You, or at least so far, when it appears, you still get to keep your toys. They're just controlling your activity and your movement and your national money. So if you snap out of that, if you're not dependent on it, if you don't need their schools, if you don't need their most of their institutions, you might be able to do well and survive for yourself. And of course, you could combine the two, where I think this is likely to be headed, which is Bitcoiners are going to rally around each other and go to jurisdictions that are favorable and basically build these kind of citadels where we'll have access to our own food, our own cows, and we'll be living next to each other so that our kids can socialize with one another and have something like a normal childhood of what children around the world could have expected to have before 2020.
Yep. Interestingly enough, our lives barely changed through the last 2 years, right? Like, comparatively speaking, of course, compared to other people who lost their jobs, who really cannot make it happen for their kids to, meet other kids. They don't understand how to unschool. Like, we were all prepared for that. We knew we couldn't trust government before Corona. And I had 80, probably by now 90 flights since the beginning of Corona. I had to take 2 PCR tests overall throughout the whole time, through 90 flights. My work hasn't changed. I'm hanging out with my friends. That didn't change. I'm eating great quality food because it's locally produced. There's no supply chain shortages because it's from the farm next door. So, like, my life is totally fine because I was prepared to all that. So the more sovereignty tools you implement in your life now, the less attack vectors that will actually, change your life. So that's pretty cool to experience, because I wouldn't say that I'm like totally prepared. I'm not where I want to be, but even that was enough for me to still thrive through the weirdest year of most people's lives.